1965, 4 friends set out to explore the depths of this forbidden underwater cavern, aiming to reach the mysterious bottom floor, but without a trace. 2 of them vanished into the watery depths, never to be seen again. The group of friends could have never imagined the death trap that was waiting for them at the floor of the chasm. And to this day, scientists still don't fully understand this dangerous geological anomaly. These are the final moments of the Devil's Hole diving tragedy. On the evening of June 20th, 1965, 4 high school friends arrived at the infamous Death Valley National Park, just 90 miles northwest of Las Vegas, Nevada. The 4 youngsters jumped fence after fence, ignoring every warning sign along the way. Armed with nothing but their brazen confidence and amateur diving gear, they were oblivious to the grim reality that awaited them. It was clear these boys were way over their heads. After roughly half an hour, they finally reached the entrance, known as the Devil's Hole. The hole's entrance is a deceptively serene and narrow strip of water, just 8 feet wide and 60 feet long. So why such an ominous name? It might be because no one knows exactly how deep the hole is, or perhaps the fact that the water is around 92 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. It also didn't help that Charles Manson, the notorious cult leader and serial killer, was obsessed with the Devil's Hole. Driven by delusion, Manson meditated for 3 intense days in front of the hole's entrance. On the 3rd day, he was convinced that the abyss was none other than the biblical gateway to the underworld, as mentioned in the Book of Revelations. All of these may be compelling reasons for the name. However, as you'll soon see, the true Devil's Hole lies deep within the water's depths, as no one that day could have imagined the deadly dangers that lurk beneath. The eager teens quickly began putting their scuba gear on, but in a twist of fate, Jack, the group's youngest, decided to remain above, taking on the role of the group's lookout instead. Undeterred, Paul, David and Bill barely acknowledged the change, pressing on with their preparations. They double-checked their flashlights, signaling readiness with a nod, before plunging into the chilling embrace of the Devil's Hole. The structure of this underwater cavern was a unique one. The entrance is a water-filled vertical shaft that feeds directly into the main chamber. However, around 90 feet down, the route narrows into a constricted passage that eventually opens up to a massive abyss known as Acre's Chasm. This portion of the cavern is incredibly wide. In fact, it's so big that if you shine your light towards any one direction, you won't be able to see the walls, even with the crystal clear water. Those who have dared to venture down describe the chasm like drifting in the cosmos of space. Shortly into their descent, Bill realized that his oxygen was depleting rapidly, so he urgently signaled the others to ascend. Meanwhile, Jack was feeling uneasy above, with hours stretching endlessly as he awaited the return of his friends. The clock struck past midnight when David and Bill re-emerged, gasping for the night air. But Paul was nowhere in sight. With frantic eyes, they turned to Jack. Their hopes crumbled when he spoke. Paul's not back yet. A silent terror passed between David and Bill. They knew they had to go back for their friend. So, the two gripped their lifelines, their regulators, and dove back into the unforgiving darkness. In a later interview, Bill recalled the urgency in their second descent. David surged ahead of Bill, but with each stroke, he kept getting further and further away. Eventually, Bill lost track of David. His flashlight, the only source of light, was on the verge of dying. Getting lost in the pitch-black darkness would only make the situation worse, so Bill made the tough decision to return back and wait for his two friends. In a race against time, Jack and Bill eventually went to alert the authorities after their friends hadn't returned for some time. The police, well aware of the cave's lethal reputation, knew exactly who to call: Jim Houts. Jim was a seasoned cave diver, but more importantly, he was extremely familiar with diving the Devil's Hole, as he went down regularly. Within a matter of hours, Jim and his dive partner arrived, prepared for a rescue mission shrouded in hope and dread. There was a chance, slim as it was, that the missing divers had made their way to an area known as Brown's Room, a vast air pocket within the cave's system. So, with their gear ready, Jim and his partner approached the entrance of Devil's Hole. They submerged into the pitch black, their lights cutting through the darkness as they descended 90 feet to the cave's narrowing section. Squeezing through the tight passage, they emerged into the immense void of the chasm, their lights failing to reach the distant walls. Their mission was to navigate left, hug the ceiling, and find the passageway to Brown's room through a suffocatingly narrow tunnel. They pushed upward, inching through the constricting space towards the air pocket. But upon reaching Brown's room, their hearts sank. No sign of the lost divers. By now, the divers were certainly out of air, so it could only mean one thing. Jim and his partner ventured deeper into the chasm. If the air pocket was empty, their last hope lay in a precarious area named the lower ledge. This rocky shelf, perched roughly halfway down the chasm's depth, served as a natural break before the final plunge into the abyss. As the rescue divers flashed their lights into the overwhelming vastness, Jim's flashlight suddenly caught a glint of hope. It was a dive mask and a single fin, and so with heavy hearts, they made several decompression stops along the way before fully emerging, bearing the silent witnesses of the tragedy. When finally above, the confirmation was grim. The belongings matched Dave and Paul's gear. Facing the somber reality, Jim delivered the chilling verdict to the anxious group. It was now time to switch to a body retrieval mission. Jim and his partner plunged back into the hole again, navigating the 90-foot descent to the narrow passage that leads into Acre's chasm below. Beyond the lower ledge, they ventured deeper, descending towards the bottom of the chasm, where any bodies should be unmistakably visible against the vast flat floor. With the water clarity helping in their search, they swept their lights over the floor, expecting at any moment to uncover a lifeless body. Yet, there was nothing. No sign of the missing divers, no more abandoned gear, just the silent, empty floor of the deep. Frustration mounting, they began to question their search. But it was then that Jim's eye caught an anomaly, a small, unassuming opening in the cave floor, just barely large enough for an equipped diver to fit through. As they cautiously approached, they felt an unmistakable pull, a current drawing water and sucking anything else nearby into the abyssal void of the tunnel. Resisting the suction, Jim prepared his weighted line, a tool he often used for gauging the depths of a new tunnel he planned to enter. He released the line into the hole, watching as it descended past the 932-foot mark without meeting resistance. This revealed a disturbing revelation. Being at least 932 feet deep, that hole was an unfathomable vertical tunnel stretching further into the Earth's crust than anyone could have ever imagined. So with one final defeated glance at the ominous hole, Jim reeled in his line, exchanging a knowing look with his partner. "No way," he conveyed silently. "We're not going down there." They understood the risks all too well. Not only were they unequipped for the depths below, but the fierce current pulling everything into the tunnel meant they likely wouldn't be able to get out. Once surfaced, Jim delivered his grim theory. The missing divers had likely succumbed to nitrogen narcosis, their judgment clouded as they drifted unknowingly into the suction of the tunnel. With the higher pressures of increased depth, the nitrogen is pushed into the bloodstream. This has a narcotic effect, similar to alcohol intoxication, so they were swept away in their drunken state before the realization dawned on them, and at that point, they were already too far gone. Keep in mind, this was back in 1965. Nitrox, the special blend of nitrogen and oxygen, was not a mainstream or readily available resource for recreational divers. However, when diving to such depths, nitrogen narcosis becomes a near certainty without it. To this day, their disappearance remains a mystery, as the bodies still have not been recovered. Scientists still don't know the true depths of that hole, and they don't plan on taking the risks to find out. But in 2012, a large 7.4 magnitude earthquake shook the southern coast of Guerrero, Mexico. Remarkably, over 2,000 miles from the epicenter, Devil's Hole felt the earthquake's echoes as a tsunami came roaring through the hole's entrance. This led scientists to believe that this mysterious yet deadly hole connects to a massive underwater ocean that reaches regions as far as Indonesia, Japan, Chile, and Mexico. The haunting possibility that the remains of the lost divers could have been drifting in the silent expanse right under our feet only adds a chilling and terrifying layer to this tragedy. Today, the abyss of Devil's Hole remains off-limits without a permit. In fact, there have been more people on the moon than to the depths of this deadly underwater cavern.